YouTube, welcome back to Peterson Auto. Today we're going to cover some 64.5 specific Mustang details. Since I acquired one that I thought was a 65, this one's a 64.5, we're going to show you what makes it a 64.5. Unfortunately, this changeover was not a direct changeover. It was not everything happened at once. So, you know, one thing changed, a couple months later another thing changed. Different plants change different things at different times. No guarantees on if you have a 64.5. I don't want to hear why I'm right, why I'm wrong. I have 5 years experience in the Mustang industry, specifically dealing with classic Mustangs, under my belt here. So this is stuff I've gathered from that experience. I've also compiled it with a bunch of accepted resources to be experts in this field. So that being said, 64.5 Mustang specific things. First one is your wiper bezels. The 64.5 has a actual bezel here with like a locking nut ordeal, as you can clearly see. The 65 does not. The shaft just sticks through the cowl. Next thing, colors. Some of the colors changed. The turquoise blue type color changed. And I found that one out because this is like originally the turquoise blue. So there's a different color, turquoise blue, for a 64.5 than there is a 65. So some of the other colors did that too. Another 64.5 thing, and this is one of the telltale signs for most people: hood molding. As you can see, there is none. There's no hood molding on this. And if we get down here, there you go. You look at the bottom, you can clearly see there's no provisions for it either. 3 different hoods with hood molding and then 2 without. The 2 without hood moldings, there's one with a folded over seam here, as you can see. That is the early model. There's one without a folded over seam. That is the mid changeover model, is what it is. There are a lot of details this car would have, but it has been modified. So yeah, unfortunately I can't cover everything. Another one is these hood stops. If you look at the top and you see a Phillips head screw, that's a 64.5 thing. No Phillips head screw, 65. I'm not opening the hood right now for you though. Unfortunately, it's just too much of a pain in the rear with only one bolt in it. I'm getting there. But the hood stops is another one. This has a 302 in it. Can't show you anything engine specific, unfortunately. These vents in the radiator support are 64.5. The generator made the battery run hotter, so they put vents in here. If I recall, there's a little rubber flap also type thing that goes over this, if I recall. Don't hold me to that at all. We make our way around. Actually, I'm going to walk over to our parts pile next, because the quarter extensions, those teal things on either end, there is a difference, and I have a great example for you right over here. Quarter extensions, the difference is the seal. That is the lip where the seal goes on. That's a 65 part. This does not have the lip for the seal. This is a 64 part. So other than that, there's really no difference. Visually, there's really no difference actually, other than a very slight gap between these, and this is a little tighter fit. You can always take the seals off of these to make a tighter gap, but I mean, it's so minute. It's unbelievable. Next thing we're going to cover is going to be this shifter bezel. Shifter bezels are different. The retaining plate is different, and the handle is different. The shifter bezels for the 64.5 don't have an indicator in this area here. Where's this park reverse drive, if I recall? Should be indicator marks on there. They have them here instead. And then the handles are physically smaller for 64.5s. This plate is physically smaller. This bezel is physically smaller for a 64.5 concourse correct bezel. You know, the original Ford bezels, physically smaller. Next thing, the ponies. The mounting of this pony, there we go, on the top and the bottom, slightly changed between 64.5 and 65. Slightly changed as in very, 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 very little difference to it. I think it's something like the difference between a nice screw like this and like a Phillips screw type of thing. As I said, this car has been pieced together somewhat, so I don't have every last detail available. Other things, the horn ring. This is 65 horn ring, if I recall correctly. The generator style had a slight different setup there. So this is a 65 horn ring. Generator style had a big round flat plate, had one horn contact. The 65 had two. The turn signal switch and some of the column internals changed too because of that. So just something to be aware of mostly. 64.5, when you look at the tail lights, right underneath them you'll see little lights. 65, 64.5 wouldn't have those. Those are reverse lights. The gas cap, 64.5, has this in red. That looks like it was once red and someone tried to maybe paint it black at one time. 64.5, the Mustang is red. 65, it is black like the Ford. So there's a little difference for you. Let's go on to some interior differences. The gauge panel there, 64.5 and 65 non-GTs would have a panel that looks like this. The generator cars have a generator light in it. The alternator cars have a light that says alternator. So, 64.5 obviously would have had a generator. 65 would have had an alternator. And that is the number one major difference you see in these cars. What everyone usually determines as 64.5 is something that originally came with a generator. If it came with an alternator, it's a 65. But as I said, some things did carry over. Clip-on versus screw-on door handles. These are clip-on. Clip-on were all early style. Somewhere in the mid-65 production there, they changed to a screw-on style. But it wasn't necessarily just that's going to make you a 64.5 again. Armrest, this one's missing. We have one over there. The area in the back where your hand would go in, if you can even see that from here, is slightly narrower on the 64.5 because they took them off the Falcons or something like that. So, another small little detail that you're going to notice. And another major difference, you look over there at the carpet where it goes up to the door sill plate. You can see that's vinyl, that's not carpet. 64.5 had vinyl going up there. 65 would have had carpet going up there. So, another crucial detail for you to remember on that one. Other than that, I think we've covered most of the major ones. There are very, very small things where you look at, there we go, choke knob, and the vent knob would have had specific markings on them. Very, very minute things there, though. And they're really ones that it's come down when you're doing concourse. Wow, that's fuzzy. Apparently you can't zoom in that well on that. When you're doing concourse, it's what the car came with. So what was factory on that car? If you don't know, you're taking your best guess. Oh, look, one more thing I found. I can see how many miles this has on it. 21,618,7. I don't know if it's 21,000 or if that's rolled over like to 621,000. But, kind of cool thing. Oh, two more details. Door lock knobs, 64.5 would typically have a color-coded knob and a color-coded grommet that is not pictured here. 65 would typically have the chrome. So, for example, the 64.5 cars that were sent around the US and around the world as display models actually had chrome knobs. So, you know, this knob did exist. I think it was for a Galaxy, don't quote me on that they actually wound up transferring over and using it on the Mustang. But, you know, something to remember and consider there. And then the belt line here, the belt line weather strip. More specifically, I think it is the outer. But if it has a chrome bead, it is a 65. If it does not have a chrome bead, it is 64.5 weather strip. So another one of those little things to remember. I don't see a chrome bead here, so I'm going to assume 64.5. Which by production date, etc., it would be an early 65, aka the 64.5 model. And one last fun fact for you there. Actually, two fun facts. I don't know if I mentioned it when I mentioned the hood. The headlight buckets. As you can see back in there, have a difference on them too. Specifically that area, you can see the grill is black. That area is where the headlight goes. That area right there is your specific difference. See how it's a nice crisp, clean edge? That is a 65 headlight bucket. 64.5 had a bevel over to match up with the hood not having the molding on it. So, little tiny difference there. But, yeah, just something to consider. And a fun fact of the day for you regarding 64.5 Mustangs is per Ford, they never made a 64.5 Mustang. The 65 was an 18-month production run, and that means if you have a 64.5 Mustang, you have a 65 Mustang per Ford. However, there were enough running changes between the two, as we've discussed most of them here, to dictate the aftermarket and collectors creating this new 64.5 model year that included a lot of more specific things to those earlier cars. So again, per Ford, never existed. Per the aftermarket, yes, there were differences, and you got to keep those in consideration. So, you know, as I get this thing, you know, rolling and whatnot, we'll get a little more information on it for you, a little more videos hopefully here and there. But I'm not going to get working on it hard for a while, till at least the truck's done and have room in the garage. So that being said, if you're interested in the Mustangs, you want to learn more about early Mustangs, I have tons of sheet metal replacement to do, tons of interior to do, tons of chassis fabrication to do. Like and subscribe. Something you want to see, go ahead and comment it. You know, if it's within my time or my budget to do that, I'll definitely do it, you know. I mean, it would go as far as if I can get a full floor pan for this for cheap enough that I could justify doing it, you know, maybe a decent discount or something. I put a full floor pan in it just to show you how it's done, and then rip it right out and put a full chassis in. But, you know, anything you want to see, let me know, and I'm going to start gathering a list of it, and we'll get videos on it for you. So that's the 65 Mustang race car project. Time to go fast. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe to Peterson Auto.